Self-defense rests, let's lay it down. Gonna dig deep, wave that verdict round. The defense rests, time to analyze. With the evidence, we'll unveil the crime. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule at the defense rests.
Oh. Got to get into the groove. Hello. Good morning. Yay. Hair dripping wet. Just got out the shower. Squeaky clean. I actually go when I walk now. Howdy doody. Good morning. Are we all well? Did we have good sleep? What are we up to? What's the weather like? I've gone for a sunset theme because it's fucking freezing here. So red and orange. I'm going to pretend I'm in Thailand. That's my thought for the day. So, excitements? Anyone? Hello, my darling. Long time no see. Welcome. Oh, I think I've sat. Hello, darling. I think I've sat at this computer half of the afternoon. Yeah, just Ty's had to go to court for the last couple of days, so he hasn't been able to do his stream with Aussie. So she's been going through his videos blind. No idea, unfortunately. Trying to work out who's who and what's what, and yeah. So I've sort of been in the background giving her little tidbits and stuff. But she's been she streamed a 10-hour day yesterday, and she's up to at least eight hours from when I left earlier. That's why I had to rush, have a shower, make myself a coffee, sort the cats out, yeah. Snacks, coffee. Yeah, I'm good. So now yesterday's stream, because the audio was so bad, I actually went in and extracted it and tried to clean it up a bit. Couldn't really do a great deal with it, but I was able to get a transcript of sorts that I summarized when I've put it in the description box of the video if you wanted to have a read, because it was terrible. And I haven't had a chance to preview this one. Same court, same cameraman. But today is the last day. Like, it's only 3 days of trial. So the next one is the penalty phase, and that goes for, I think, 4 days. So that's why I thought it was a longer trial. I didn't actually read the fine print. Yeah, you get that. It's not a trial day. It's a sentencing day. That's face. It is what it is. All right. Let's share a screen, shall we? So, for those of you that have not been here for the last couple of days, welcome. This is the defense rest. We are day 3 of a death penalty trial out of Florida, Putnam County. It's a death penalty case, and the defendant's name is Mark Wilson, and he is charged with 2 first-degree unalivings of TAITON and Robert Baker. TAITON was 14 at the time. Robert was 12. He was their aunt's boyfriend who lived in the little house to the right-hand side on the same property, and attacked them with a hammer and a knife to the head and neck area. So now, if you do go back and watch the first day of trial, be warned, there is graphic content in there. The crime scene photos, they show pretty much everything. So be warned. And hopefully we don't see much more because I haven't had a chance to proof it. So you've been warned. I will, if I think there's going to be something, I will put the banner up, but otherwise, forewarned is forearmed. Let's do it, shall we?
You did see.
I did.
Okay, you did not. This was the third question.
No, shall I pick that one? There we go.
No one observed any of those are. Thank you. All right.
Why are they laughing at Trump?
Thank you, Judge. Say we call Allison Barnes.
Alison Barnes. Come on down, Alison. It's a terrible angle of the dangle, I must say. Hello, welcome. I feel like I'm missing something. What am I missing?
Speak directly into that microphone. They're fairly unidirectional. The clerk will place you in a group to start off.
Thank you. Solemnly swear from the testimony shall be this call should be the truth, the whole truth, and yourself with God. I do, thank you.
Ah, that's what it
Please
is.
state your full name for the record.
Mirrored my appearance.
My name is Allison Farms.
It's better.
And what agency do you work for, Ms. Barnes?
Looking the wrong way.
The Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Jones.
Good morning, ma'am. How you doing?
Good.
Can you tell us what you do at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Ah,
I am a senior.
actually, did you see? I took a screenshot. We had this on the first day, and the closed captioning. She was the with defendants. No, sorry, the victim's mother was on the stand, and she was talking about driving her father's manual vehicle. So this is what the this closed captions decided they were going to make of that sentence. It's supposed to be stick, okay? Stick. Gold.
Crime laboratory analyst.
See, I'm already
in the
interrupting.
late print section.
Mind telling us what the latent print section does?
I process items of evidence that are submitted to the lab for the presence of latent prints. I'll then do a comparison of these unknown latent prints to known individuals to either identify.
So we're still on the state's case, aren't we? We haven't started defense. No.
No, we know what a latent print is. Do you mind telling the folks what an actual latent print is?
The term latent means hidden, and a latent print is an unintentional or chance impression of the friction-rich skin, which is found on the undersides of your hands and the soles of your feet, left on an object or a surface when it's touched. Because it's hidden, it sometimes needs to be enhanced, and I'll use powders, chemicals, light sources to do this.
What do you usually compare a latent print to?
To an ink print or a known standard. And these are deliberate recordings of the friction-rich skin, and they're made by placing the fingers in a layer of black printer's ink and transferring this to a contrasting color background, such as a standard white fingerprint card.
Do you mind telling us a little bit of your training and background to become a latent print examiner?
So I have a Bachelor of Science from
So do I.
Southern University that I received in 1996. I also completed a 2-phase training program with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. The first phase consisted of the academic portion of my training and had written exercises, practicals, comparison exercises. The second phase consisted of supervised casework under the direct supervision of a qualified latent print analyst. I also try to attend a conference or training yearly to keep up with current issues.
Have you, do you annually receive proficiency training in latent print examination?
I do annually take a proficiency test.
Is that just a blind test from an outside source that measures whether or not you're getting things accurate?
Yes,
And you've always passed those tests?
I have.
Thank you, ma'am. Have you ever testified, well, over the course of your career with FDLE, has it been 22, 23 years?
I've worked for FDLE for 25 years now. 23 of those have been in the latent print section.
Over the course of your career, how many actual latent or known fingerprints do you think you've reviewed and compared to one another?
Thousands.
Have you ever testified in court before as an expert in latent print examination?
Yes, I have.
How many times, ma'am?
approximately 60 times.
If I could bring your attention now to FDLE case number 2020-04-05686. Did you receive some items from the Putnam County Sheriff's Office related to an investigation of a murder to analyze those for fingerprints?
Yes, I did.
When did you receive those items, ma'am?
They were received into the laboratory on August 31st, 2020. And on 9/18/2020.
Now, when those come in, like if there's items that are going to be tested for DNA and also fingerprints, where does that go to first?
Everything comes into our evidence intake section, and they start the chain of custody for all the evidence that goes through our laboratory. Things go in an order. So DNA would work evidence before I would throw fingerprint powder on stuff. So everything gets stored in the vault until it's assigned to an analyst, and they pick up the evidence.
So certain items that we have were worked for DNA first, you would have got it after that.
Correct. I would get it after the biology section completed their examinations.
And if I can ask you, certain items, did you receive a hammer to look for fingerprints on?
Yes.
Did you receive a knife?
Yes,
Did you receive some paper towels?
I did.
And did you receive a cigarette box? Cigarette box?
Yes,
Did you receive a knife sheath that was with a knife?
I did.
May I approach the witness, Judge? You may. I'm going to approach and show you what's in evidence in states 21. If you could take just a look at this, ma'am. I know probably looking at the back will be helpful for you.
Yes.
And then looking at the items, can you see numbers and stuff that help you?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Did you, and let's talk about the knife and the hammer and the sheath right here that's in states 21. Did you receive those for processing for fingerprints?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us if you were able to process those and if there was any results?
So on the hammer and the knife, I start with a visual examination. And then after that, I proceeded to an alternate light source, which using wavelengths will sometimes show me latent prints that are not processed. After that, I process the items with cyanoacrylate ester or super glue, which when fumed will adhere to fingerprints. After that, I used a dye stain known as M-Star. And after that, I used a blood reagent called Amido Black that is a protein stain. After all of that, on those two items, I did not find any latent prints of value for comparison on those two items.
What about on the sheath? And can you describe if that's like a different surface or why you mean?
On the sheath and the two fabric placemats, I only did a visual examination because they are fabric and it is not a surface that's conducive for latent print processing.
So through your, I guess, examination, you didn't see any latent prints of value?
I did not.
Now, if you do have a fabric, if you could see latent prints of value if it were made in blood or in mud or something, that's what you're looking for most of the time?
Correct. So a latent print is on the undersides of your hands is the friction ridge skin. And this raised portion of skin is lined with tiny pores. They're constantly exuding perspiration so that when you touch an object or a surface, you're going to leave an outline of these ridges. Also, if your hands are contaminated with some sort of substance, such as blood, paint, or grease, you're going to leave an outline of these ridges as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Approach the witness again, Judge. Okay. Then we're going to approach and show you what is in evidence in states 23. You can just take a moment, look at the markings, see if it helps you out, and then turn it around for you.
Yes.
You just look at that, look at the items, numbers.
Yes.
Okay. If you could tell the jurors, are these paper towels something you try to process for prints or latent prints? I'm sorry.
Yes. These are the paper towels with my initials, and then this is the cigarette pack that I process for latent prints.
What process did you use on these paper towels?
So on the paper towels, I used a chemical known as ninhydrin. It works with the amino acids found in your perspiration, and I sprayed the items with ninhydrin.
Is that why these paper towels look a little discolored?
It's why they look a little purple. Yes.
And did you find any latent prints of value on the paper towels?
I did not find any latent prints of value on the paper towels.
And on the cigarette box, were you able to process that too?
On the cigarette box, I also processed this item with super glue, black fingerprint powder, and then I also did the anhydride on it, and I did not find any latent prints of value on that item either.
Thank you, ma'am. Finally, did you receive a CD that had, I guess, 16 photographs of possible latent prints that were inside the residence when it was processed by the CSI?
Yes, I did.
And can you describe how many? It says 16 photographs. Were they all individual 16 photographs, or were they repeats?
There were 16 individual photographs, but they were only of 4 different areas.
So I'm going to show you what is in evidence as states.
At least we've got a better picture and better audio today. Touch wood.
$17. And I'm going to show you.
Been hanging around with Aussie too long.
I believe it's 17C. Maybe.
Did I send my emails out? I can't remember.
So ignore the P, it's 17C. So if you can look at that, do you recognize this as one of the photographs you may have looked at, ma'am?
Yes.
And let me zoom in. Do you mind stepping down and maybe I can have the witness step down?
Please.
And here is a pointer if it's helpful.
I can just,
Point,
I can
perfect.
just point.
When you received the photograph, were you able to, what's the process you take to see if there's any latent prints of value in there?
So I'm doing a visual exam of all the items when I get it, and I'm looking for the ridge detail that's found in the fingerprints or in latent prints. And I can see right here, there is ridge detail noted right along in this one. And then I can tell by the size and the shape that it's going to be a palm, but it's a right palm. This area right here is this area of your hand. And this area right here is this area of your hand. So it's like this. And this is a right palm. That's the only item on this exhibit that's of value for comparison.
Now, 17C, did you ever receive, and I'm going to show you what's in evidence as states 27. Can you look at that and see if you received those known fingerprints to actually compare?
They must have a wooden
Yes, I
floor
did.
still because I
And
can
who
hear
are
them
those
walking.
fingerprints of, ma'am?
These are finger and palm prints
Ah, cool.
bearing the name
Thank you.
TAITON S. Baker.
When you opened up those fingerprints of Tate and Baker, were you able to compare his fingerprints to that palm print left there?
I was.
Did you make any determination
Yes.
or results of that?
He's looking up your
examination?
address.
I identified the palm print located on this, in this photograph, to the palm print standard bearing the name TAITON S. Baker.
Do you know which palm print? Was it his right hand?
It was the right palm print.
And the process that you look at is you actually look at the ridge detail and other factors or circumstances in the known fingerprint or palm print, and then you compare it to what you see there.
Yes, to make comparisons, we place the prints side by side, and I'm looking at the individual
Good, isn't
ridge
it?
flow and
Actually, it feels
individual
quite nice in the
characteristics in
hand.
each print to determine if
What he
they're in the
said,
same
he said.
relative position and unit relationship to one another. And basically by that, what I mean is that each characteristic must correspond not only in its position in each print, but in its position in relation to all the other characteristics that are in the print.
And your determination was they were a match for Tate and Baker's right palm print.
Correct, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, just a moment, Judge. You may. No further questions, Judge.
Cross-examination.
No question.
All right. Permanent excusal.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much, ma'am. You are permanently excused as witness.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Your next witness, Kate.
It's actually bloody cold here. About to put on my hoodie. I should order a few of those and sell them.
You're gonna take a seat right here, ma'am, and then speak directly into that microphone. Once you get settled, the clerk will place you on your own.
Oh dear. Okay, you win. What is it here?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the
58 Fahrenheit.
truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. Please state your full name for the record.
My name is Amanda Stratton. My last name is spelled Stratton.
Thank you. And what agency do you work for?
I work for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement out of Jacksonville, Florida.
Thank you very much. You may proceed, Ms. Dunn.
Thank you.
I forgot to change the clock yesterday, so it's 8:56 a.m. on Tuesday for you, isn't it? Is that right? Oh, that's not it. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Pratt.
Yeah,
Good morning.
we'll do it.
Can you explain to the jurors what you do for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I am a crime laboratory analyst in the biology DNA section in Jacksonville, Florida at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
And how long have you been employed with FDLE?
I have been employed with FDLE for almost 9 years.
And have you been in that same discipline of DNA for those 9 years?
Yes, I have.
Did you have any experience in the field prior to your employment at FDLE?
I did. Prior to my employment at FDLE, I was employed as a forensic serologist at a private DNA testing laboratory located in South Florida called DNA Labs International. I was in that position for approximately 3 years before I moved to Jacksonville and assumed the role of crime laboratory analyst at the FDLE.
And what type of educational background or degrees do you hold?
I obtained my Bachelor's of Science in Forensic Science from the University of Central Florida, as well as a minor in chemistry from the University of Central Florida in 2010.
And what type of training did you undergo at FDLE to fulfill your role in the DNA section?
FDLE has a 2-part program. In the first phase, it's broken into a series of modules. For each module, I am required to review academic literature, perform laboratory tasks on mock samples, and I have to complete a written assessment at the end of each module. At the end of that first phase, I take an oral board with my peers and my technical leader. The second phase is supervised casework under the direction of a qualified laboratory analyst, and then that is completed with a mock trial.
Can you describe your job duties? What do you do on a daily basis in your role at FDLE?
I examine items of evidence for the possible presence of bodily fluids. I will collect samples from those items of evidence and perform DNA testing on those items. Once I obtain DNA profiles from the items of evidence, I will compare those DNA profiles to DNA profiles from known individuals, and then I report my findings and testify as needed. Part of my job also includes assisting with training or assisting with validations, as well as undergoing continuing education.
Approximately how many items of evidence have you tested for DNA?
I have tested thousands of items and hundreds of cases.
And how do you stay current in your field?
I'm required to undergo continuing education on an annual basis, at least 8 hours, but typically we end up doing usually about a week-long conference every year. And then we also participate in journal article reviews, literature review on a monthly basis.
Is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement lab in Jacksonville accredited?
We are accredited. It is accredited by the American American Standards Institute National Accreditation Board. And we have held that our accreditation status since 1990. Being accredited just means that we've demonstrated our ability to adhere to standards set forth by the forensic DNA testing community, including the FBI quality assurance standards. It also confirms that we
How many
are
times do
in
you think she
compliance
said
with
that
our own
in the
policies
mirror?
and procedures. In order to maintain that accreditation, we have to undergo internal audits every year, external audits every other year, and then reaccreditation audits every 4 years.
You mentioned you testified before, and that's part of your duties. Do you know how many times you testified in this area?
I have testified 35 times.
What is contamination and how do you prevent it in your lab?
Contamination is the introduction of, or unintentional introduction of DNA into a sample. We take procedures, quality control procedures to minimize the possibility of contamination into a sample. Part of those is wearing personal protective equipment, meaning we will use gloves and change them frequently. We are wearing our lab coats and masks and hairnets when we are working with items of evidence. We have to clean our utensils and tools between each item of evidence. And we also will run what's known as a reagent blank in parallel with our samples to monitor for any potential contamination. We have controls set in place throughout the DNA testing process that check for this, and then we evaluate it throughout the entire process.
Do you undergo proficiency training and how often if so?
Yes, I am required to undergo proficiency testing twice a year. A proficiency test is a test provided by an external agency. Ours is Collaborative Testing Services. They submit a test to us. I am to treat it like I would any normal case working sample or samples. And my results are sent back to Collaborative Testing Services. They check to make sure that I obtained the correct result.
Have you ever failed one of those proficiency tests?
I have not.
What is chain of custody and what measures are done at your lab to ensure that?
A chain of custody is something to track the item of evidence throughout the entire case from the time it's collected to the time the case is completed. As it pertains to FDLE, once an item of evidence is submitted to the laboratory, it is given a unique case number and item number. And that it's a label is placed onto that item and it keeps that same number throughout the entire testing process. When it's submitted to the laboratory, it's placed into a secure vault, and only a select number of individuals have access to that vault, and they will transfer the items of evidence to me when I'm ready to perform testing on them. When I'm completed with my testing, they can stay in my secure storage locker, and then I can return them back to our evidence section. And all of these transactions are monitored within our laboratory information management system called LIMS.
And can you tell the jurors, explain to them what DNA is?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is our genetic makeup. It gives us our physical outward appearance, and it also instructs our body on how to function. We get half of our DNA from our mother, half from our father, and no two individuals have the same DNA profile with the exception of identical twins. Now, most of our DNA, though, throughout our body is the same, meaning humans are born with 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyes, but there's a very, very small percentage of DNA that is unique to each person with the exception of identical twins, and that is what makes DNA so forensically significant.
What is STR DNA analysis when you talk about that?
STR stands for short tandem repeat. So if you think of your genome as a map, I am specifically interested in 21 locations on that map, on our genome, plus 3 gender determining markers. So I'm looking at 24 total locations on our genome. At each one of those locations, I'm checking to see for a specific pattern of the DNA and how many times that pattern repeats itself back to back to back. We count how many times it repeats itself, and that is known as a DNA type. So I expect to see 2 DNA types at each location, one that comes from your mother and one that comes from your father. So I'm looking at 24 areas and 2 DNA types at each one of those locations.
And what are the steps in the lab that you perform to obtain those results?
There are a series of 4 steps that I have to perform. The first step is called extraction. Essentially, I'm removing the DNA from the material that it's on. Oftentimes, that's a cotton swab. So I will place that sample into a tube with a lid, and we add chemicals and then apply heat. And it's almost similar to the way that you would wash stained laundry. And that stained liquid is isolated and then further purified, and that is my DNA sample that I will take on to the next step called quantitation. So quantitation is where I am measuring how much DNA I have in my sample. This is important for me because I need to know how much I'm working with for the next step, which is called amplification. The third step of amplification is also known as PCR, which stands for polymerase chain reaction. I'm making millions and millions of copies of those specific targeted DNA patterns. And it's done in a way similar to the way that your body naturally replicates DNA. So it makes millions of copies. The final step is called detection. So that sample is placed onto an instrument that detects the DNA fragments, and it generates a graph with a series of peaks and valleys, and that graph is what we call the DNA profile. And then I make my comparisons.
Is it standard procedure to calculate statistics on certain DNA profiles?
Yeah, any type of association that is made to from a known individual DNA profile to DNA from evidence, I have to provide a statistic, and I perform statistics. I give a likelihood ratio. So it is no different than us determining the likelihood of rain outside today if there are gray clouds in the sky. I'm specifically interested in the likelihood of the observed evidence, giving 2 alternating arguments.
And do you, does computing that statistic also include the use of a database?
It does. I use a database called the US 29 autosomal STR loci for the US population, and it contains 1,035 samples that were provided to the NIST laboratory, and they perform DNA testing on those samples. These are liquid blood samples and buccal swabs or cheek swabs from known individuals who are unrelated, and their ethnicities are self-identified. So they perform DNA testing on these samples to determine how frequent we expect to see each DNA type in the general population.
Ms. Stratton, did you examine evidence in the case of the 2 homicide victims, Robert and Tate Baker?
Yes, I did.
Did you receive any buccal swabs or buccal swabs from known individuals to compare to any profiles you may develop through evidence?
I did.
And do you recall who you received samples from?
I received buccal swabs from, buccal swabs from Robert Baker, buccal swabs from TAITON Baker, buccal swabs from Cynthia Guinan, buccal swabs from Mark Wilson Jr., buccal swabs from Sarah Benson, and buccal swabs from Chad Baker.
And you mentioned earlier, I believe in your example of how you process evidence, the example you used was from a Q-tip. Would that have been that process that you did with those items of evidence to develop a profile?
Yes, a buccal swab is a swabbing from the inside of the cheek, and it's used to develop a DNA profile for that individual to be used for comparison to DNA profiles from items of evidence. And I did perform all of those steps on these buccal swabs.
And did you obtain complete profiles for all of those known individuals?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Ms. Stratton, I'm going to approach you with what's already been admitted into evidence as states 34 and just ask if you recognize this particular buccal swab and who it was stated to be from.
I recognize this item. This is our FDLE label here with the yellow label. These are my markings on this item, and this is my seal along the bottom that I placed on the item after I completed my examination. These are buccal swabs from Mark Wilson Jr.
Thank you. I want to ask you now about specific items of evidence that you received in this case to analyze. Did you receive a hammer identified as FDLE item 1.1
I did.
and a knife and sheath that your agency labeled as 1.2?
Yes.
Two different placemats that your agency labeled 1.3 and 1.4?
Yes, I did.
Your main approach.
You may.
Stratton, I'm going to show you what's already been introduced into evidence as states 21. I'll show you the front and then the packaging.
Okay. Okay.
Are the items I just went through with you, are these the items that you received and examined for DNA evidence in this case?
Yes, they are.
And there's several markings and things on there. Did you do that throughout your process?
Yes. All of these circles that you see in black, those are on the placemats. Those are my markings where I perform testing. And then any markings on the weapons, I also would mark where I collected samples from or performed testing on these items. I also included the evidence tag here. All of these were submitted in one package, and so I separated those out. This was the package they were submitted in. And so I individually gave them the item numbers 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4.
I'll leave this right here for now. Let me come up and ask you about them. I want to talk to you first about the hammer. In this case, FDLE item 1.1. Did you test that item for the presence of DNA?
I did. I performed serology testing also, which is testing for the possible presence of a bodily fluid. So I performed testing for the possible presence of blood on this item, and it did give chemical indications for the presence of blood.
And so what did you do when you located those items of blood?
I collected 3 samples from the hammer, item 1.1. One was stain A, which was located on the underside of the hammerhead. One I named stain B, which was located on the dark blue textured area of the handle. And then lastly, I collected a handler sample where I swabbed the handle of the hammer, avoiding any possible red-brown staining for possible touch DNA.
And what were your initial results as to that item?
The DNA results from items 1.1 stain A, 1.1 stain B, and 1.1 handler all demonstrated the presence of mixtures of 2 individuals with at least 1 male individual.
Were you able to compare your results to the known buccal swabs and profiles you obtained and make any determinations?
I did. I first compared TAITON Baker to these DNA mixtures. TAITON Baker is included as a possible contributor to these mixed DNA profiles. The observed mixed DNA profiles are greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if it originated from TAITON Baker in 1 unrelated individual rather than if it originated from 2 unrelated individuals. The next comparison that I made was Robert Baker to these mixtures, and I determined that Robert Baker is excluded as a contributor to these mixed DNA profiles.
And did you move on and continue to compare, since you have TAITON plus one unknown, did you continue to compare to the other DNA profiles you had?
I did. Next, I compared the DNA profile from Mark Wilson Jr. And the comparison of the profile from Mark Wilson Jr. to the mixture obtained from item 1.1 stain A failed to demonstrate sufficient statistical support for inclusion or exclusion. Therefore, no determination can be made regarding the contributions of Mark Wilson Jr. to this item.
So what is no determination is one of the terms you will report out. What is that?
Correct. So no determination, I also call inconclusive. It simply means that there is not enough data in my sample in order to support an exclusion or an inclusion into that mixture. So no determination can be made regarding that contribution.
Did you make a determination as to Cindy or Cynthia Guinan?
Yes. Cynthia Guinan is excluded as a contributor to the mixed DNA profile obtained from item 1.1 stain A. And then yes, I also compared Chad Baker. Chad Baker, comparison of the profile from Chad Baker to item 1.1 stain A failed to demonstrate sufficient statistical support for inclusion or exclusion. Therefore, no determination can be made regarding the contribution of the DNA profile from Chad Baker to that item.
Okay, and then Sarah Benson as to stain A.
Sarah Benson is excluded as a contributor to the mixed DNA profile from 1.1 stain A.
Okay. So essentially, does that mean, so the jurors understand, as to Cynthia Guinan and Sarah Benson on the hammer, excluded, absolutely, they are not, they don't match that DNA profile at all.
That's correct.
Okay. And then you just simply don't have enough information to make a decision as to Chad Baker and Mark Wilson.
Correct. And this is for stain A on item 1.1.
And then stain B were Cynthia Guinan, Sarah Benson, and Chad Baker all excluded.
Yes, that is correct.
And what about Mark Wilson Jr.?
The comparison of the profile from Mark Wilson Jr. to item 1.1 stain B failed to demonstrate sufficient statistical support for inclusion or exclusion. Therefore, no determination can be made regarding the contribution of Mark Wilson Jr. to item 1.1 stain B.
Okay. And now for the handler sample, which was the area on the handle avoiding the red brown staining, correct?
Yes,
Again, Cindy, Sarah Benson, and Chad Baker were excluded from that sample, is that right?
that's correct.
And no determination as to Mark Wilson Jr., is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I want to move on to 1.2, the knife and the sheath of the knife. Did you go through similar testing process for that item?
I did. I performed the presumptive blood testing on this item. And this item 1.2, the knife with the sheath, gave chemical indications for the presence of blood.
And did you take samples of stains in other areas of that item?
I did.
You had a stain on the knife. Can you tell the jurors where stain A was located and what your results were for that stain?
Stain A was located at on the blade near the base handle area of the knife. And I obtained a complete DNA profile consistent with a male individual from item 1.2 stain A.
And who was that individual?
I compared this DNA profile to the DNA profile from TAITON Baker, and this DNA profile matches the DNA profile from TAITON Baker. The observed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if it originated from TAITON Baker than from an unrelated individual. Other limited data was observed in a sample, which is not interpretable and may suggest the possibility of an additional contributor to that sample.
And what about stain B?
Stain B was located on the handle near the blade. And
Go ahead.
the DNA results obtained from item 1.2 stain B demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. TAITON Baker is included as a possible contributor to this mixed DNA profile. And the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from TAITON Baker and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
Oh.
Robert Baker is included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile from item 1.2 stain B. The observed mixed DNA profile is approximately 19,000 times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Robert Baker and one unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
Okay. And all other profiles you compared were excluded for that stain B.
I don't know what I've done.
Yes, that is
That's what I've done.
correct.
Okay. So you have Tayton and Robert on that particular stain. The statistics are obviously different for the 2 boys. Can you kind of describe to the jurors why that may happen or the various reasons why that can happen?
Sure. For this
Oh, but I lost
particular
you.
sample, 1 donor in this mixture of 2 donors was contributing significantly more higher amounts of DNA into that sample than the other. So the more information for that donor to
Sorry. Did you lose me for a second there? Did I mute for a bit? Because I'm trying to find. It's apparently you can set your live stream to have a members only chat optional, and I cannot find it for the life of me. I've followed the instructions. I've clicked too many buttons. I don't know what I'm doing. God damn it. Who this? And me. This is just a DNA analysis, in the trillion, billion, quadrillion, octillion, them words. Riveting stuff.
to that sample, the higher that likelihood ratio is expected to be. The less information for
looks like it's you and
any
me,
donor,
T.
the less, the smaller that likelihood ratio is I would expect to be. So in this particular sample, 1 donor is just contributing more DNA than the other.
And stain C, you described your results for stain C and where it was on the knife.
Stain C was located on the sheath near the opening. And the DNA result from item 1.2, stain C, demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. TAITON Baker is included as a possible contributor to this mixed DNA profile. And the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if it originated from TAITON Baker and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
Robert Baker, Sarah Benson, and Cynthia Guinan, you reported that were excluded from that stain, is that correct?
Robert Baker is excluded, as well as Cynthia Guinan and Sarah Benson. Yes.
And what about Mark Wilson Jr. and Chad Baker? What determination, if any, were you able to make?
Comparison of the profiles from Mark Wilson Jr. and Chad Baker to the mixture obtained from item 1.2, stain C, failed to demonstrate sufficient statistical support for inclusion or exclusion. Therefore, no determination can be made regarding the contributions of Mark Wilson Jr. And Chad Baker to this item.
And you had a stain D. Where was that located and what were the results?
Stain D was located near the end, on the sheath near the end of the handle. The DNA results obtained from item 1.2, stain D, demonstrated the presence of a mixture. And due to the limited nature of this mixed DNA result, this data is not interpretable.
So you just weren't able, you don't have enough information to make any comparisons.
That's correct.
Then you have a handler sample taken from the knife and sheath. Where was that taken? And then we'll talk about the results.
I collected a handler sample from the narrow top and bottom edges of the handle, as well as the exterior sheath, avoiding any red-brown staining.
Okay, and were you able to make any identifications or comparisons?
The DNA results obtained from item 1.2 handler demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. TAITON Baker is included as a possible contributor to this mixed DNA profile. And the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if it originated from TAITON Baker and 1 unrelated individual than if it originated from 2 unrelated individuals.
I could feel myself
And
going.
as to Mark Wilson Jr. for those items?
I got water in my ear. Why don't you write a song about that?
Mark Wilson Jr. is included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile obtained from item 1.2 handler. The observed mixed DNA profile is approximately 55,000 times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Mark Wilson Jr. and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
Now you already explained.
I believe
one
it,
reason
all right? I
why-
believe that they
the
belong
reason why
to whoever she says.
statistics could be different, the different amount of data, the different.
I don't care.
And then
Not bad. I can't listen to anyone numbers.
Therefore, no determination can be made regarding the contributions of Robert Baker, TAITON Baker, Cynthia Guinan, and Sarah Benson to this item.
Next.
stain B, remind me
Any
where
plays
that
with
was
music?
taken from?
Stain B was from the wearer's left sleeve wrist.
Oh, look, there's a nice ceiling we could watch. Ah, how's the serenity? Yeah.
To the state, there is sufficient evidence from which a jury could conclude that each of the 4 counts is stating the indictment.
All right, so it must be, state must have rested because I reckon this is the inaugural motion to dismiss. Guessing. Put it out
could be
there.
proven sufficiently. So I'm going to deny the motion for judgment of acquittal. Okay, Ms. Peoples, have you had a conversation with your client about whether he, well, first off, tell me how many witnesses you anticipate to call?
I'll prefer to.
Mr. Smith?
We won't be calling any witnesses this morning.
Okay. So that
Oh.
also means that Mr. Wilson is not going to be testifying on behalf of.
State rest as well.
All right, Mr. Wilson, I placed you under oath the other day.
Hang on,
Do it again.
hang on.
Raise your right hand.
State rests. The defense rests. We where is it? Gotta play it. Yep. That just happened.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Oh, is he gonna?
You do have a constitutional right to remain silent, and counsel has indicated that you anticipate following that by not putting on any evidence either from yourself or from anyone else. I will be instructing the jury that the fact that you don't testify is not to be considered by them in the
Didn't think you
deliberations. You can testify if you want to. That is a critical decision.
Oh,
And if you do testify.
so that means if they're both rested, then we go to jury instructions. Oh, shoot. Hang on. Let me see what's in the... Yep. Jury instructions. And they go through the verdict form. Oh, we'll have to go on to day one of the... Oh, no, I've got the closings. I've got closings to do. Oh, good. All right, let's move on to that then.
Ladies of the jury. Robert and Tayton Baker, two young
Actually, hang on.
boys.
Is this the closings for the guilt phase or the penalty phase? No, it's this one because it's the date's right. Okay, no, I'm good. It's all right. Nothing to see here. Move along. Let's put the CCs on just for shits and gigs. Let's make it better quality. Good. Done that. Done that. And begin. Righto.
With such a long life ahead of them to live. And the evidence in this case has shown no proof that there was any reason to justifiably kill or commit excusable homicide on these two boys. No reason to justify or excuse brutally beating them to death with a hammer and slitting their throats with a knife. None. They did nothing on the morning of August 26, 2020 to provoke this defendant to enter the house and kill them. He didn't get provoked by finding them with his wife. He didn't get provoked by finding them abusing his child. None of that. There's no evidence that any of that was even happening. What was going on? They were sleeping in their home that morning. The evidence at the scene supports that. They were found laying where they always went to sleep in those initial days in that home next to where their cell phones could charge. And we know they were sleeping because this man, the defendant, told detectives, I went in there. They were sleeping. They did nothing, ladies and gentlemen. And the judge just went through a lot of law with you guys, obviously. And so there's an instruction in all of that he read to you that tells you that when you consider each count.
Is it bad that we're at closing arguments and I don't recognize this chick at all? And there hasn't even been a comment on her hotness scale. Wait for it. 3, 2, 1. Who the heck? I know you're listening out there. And go. Nope. But you'll be here in a minute. You watch.
You're to start at the top and you're to analyze the evidence for the highest charge alleged and then go through the lesser included. So I'm going to spend my time this morning because the state believes, or this afternoon, the state believes that the evidence is overwhelmingly in support as charged. And so I'm going to focus on that with you. And you know, we talked in jury selection and you learned that there's more than one way to commit first-degree murder, and you've now heard those instructions. And the state's obviously going under both theories in this case, okay? And so first we'll talk about premeditation, really what that means, where that evidence comes from in this case, and then we'll talk about the felony murder, okay? And you heard the 3 elements. I don't expect those first 2 elements to be in dispute in this case, either to count 1 or count 2, okay? So we're gonna focus now and talk about why there was a premeditated killing of both Robert and Tayton Baker under the law. And again, I know the judge read this sort of at the beginning, but just remember, and you remember whether I selected you last week during the jury or Mr. Lewis, but both of us gave examples of premeditation. And you remember when we went through with you and we talked about the fact that even just somebody quickly, within seconds, going and obtaining a weapon and committing a crime that was done and over and thought of in seconds could be premeditation, okay? And you guys had that definition. Well, we have far beyond that in this case, and I want to talk about that with you. Much like most crimes, the premeditation in this case begins, obviously, with thoughts. It's very clear now that the trial and evidence has ended that this defendant thought about killing these boys. Now, why? You've now heard several things, and we're going to go over that. But clearly, He had thoughts of killing them for whatever reason, right? He gave many reasons. I was protecting my family is the overall reason, but thoughts of killing them, whether it's because he thought his family was going to be turned in, whether he thought they were doing something to his kid, his wife, whatever it is, it began with thoughts. And we have that in this case. We know while he was thinking about it and he had these thoughts and he's struggling with thoughts, what did he do in the early morning hours of August 26th? He wrote a letter to Cindy. And I want to point out a few things from that letter. You get a little bit of whatever feelings he was going through in the early morning hours. He's frustrated. He's upset. And he says to her, and this last line, one of the last lines is important if you look at the tense. Please promise me that she will always know that her dada is a soldier, talking about his daughter, and that he loved you both from day one. Why would he need to write Cindy that letter if he wasn't going to be around and if he wasn't going to be able to tell his little girl himself how much he loved her? There's been no evidence that they were fighting and breaking up. And no, he told the detectives in the interview they were just about to go get their water and power turned back on and move back in together. How much he loved his family. Now, that's the reason and the excuse that it took him a minute to come up with in the interview room as to what he meant by that letter. But that letter was written the night or the early mornings before this happened. Why? Why do you say that? Unless you need someone else to ensure that your daughter knows that you loved her because you're not going to be around. So he's putting his thoughts in writing. And then, of course, we know in this case, once the decision has been made to do it, now we've had time to reflect already. We've thought about it. We've written a letter contemplating not being around. Now we're going to arm ourselves with 2 weapons. And the 2-weapon thing is important for a couple reasons. But I want to touch on the other thing, and you may have picked up that the state pointed out a few times that in the game room outbuilding, there was a Glock, a gun box. It was pretty obvious. It sat on the corner of a desk and ammunition on top of that, okay? And we pointed that out, and you heard the testimony from Sarah Baker that the night before this, they were in that game room putting the shelves up and all of Chad's figurines, and they were trying to surprise him when he came back home. So we know Mark Wilson was in that room. We know that he likely saw that gun, and that's an option. Why didn't he take the gun? The gun still would have made it premeditated murder. But I think it's important to note what he chose. He chose 2 weapons. He chose weapons that would not necessarily make it a quick murder. A gun would have been a quicker way to kill those boys. He chose a hammer to beat them with, a knife to slit their throats if he needed to. He found 2 items. That takes time. He then entered, and while killing each of the boys, which we'll talk about, he switches weapons. He beats each of them and then switches to slitting their throats. Every step of the way, there's opportunities to stop and reflect, realize what you're doing, and not continue. And so, of course, we know those are the weapons. And so after he arms himself, he obviously walks. He walks from wherever he is on the property, his house, the other outbuilding, and enters that house. It's steps. It's not a mile. But again, there's nothing in the law that tells you that someone has to think about it for 10 minutes, walk a mile to change their mind. He has time to change his mind. He enters the house after walking from somewhere else on the property. Now I want to talk about the circumstances of the actual killing. All of this has already occurred. And then he makes a decision to enter the home, right? And when you talk about the crimes of each boy, I want to start with Robert. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit later in more detail. Even though the defendant states in his statement that he killed TAITON first, I'm going to talk to you later about why I believe that's not consistent with some of the evidence. And we may touch on it here as well. Robert, remember his injuries. He has a large neck injury and 5 other stabbing injuries. And these photos are awful, but I think you now understand why the state has to show you these things, has to show you details, because remember what Dr. Fulter said. That's not one slice to the neck. All of those little slices down there below show multiple bringing out of a blade and making the choice to do it again. And then obviously you have all of the superficial wounds in addition to that. Robert has at least 4 blunt force injuries. He had a blunt force on his chin. He had 2 over his left ear, which caused that photograph that you saw with the back of his skull cracked open. And he has the blunt force on the forehead and to the top of the head, which you saw that perfectly punched out circle, skull fracture, brain damage by the one near the ear. That takes a lot of force. Every time you beat someone with a hammer and you slice someone with a knife, that's time. That's time. And then what does he do? He covers Robert up. He covers Robert up. And then, of course, we have TAITON. TAITON has similar injuries, although a lot more going on with TAITON that you saw in the pictures and the scene. He has approximately 15 to 20. I'm just going to approximate. You guys rely on your notes from that. But we obviously have the 3 very large injuries. But remember what Dr. Folter said, every single small superficial injury on that case shows an attempt to keep slicing his neck. And then what else with TAITON? We have at least, well, let's count them. Let's count the blunt force injuries. We have the one under his lip. What did Dr. Folter tell you? And he explained why that's not something that he got hit in the face. He didn't get hit in the face. Why? Because you would clearly see an injury out here, and there was no injury. You saw the face photo of him in the beginning of the autopsy, and you don't see the injury there. So that is him laying down on the ground, being beat in the back of his head.
I just went and checked myself. I'd been there earlier. I didn't actually read the chat. I was checking because I'd sent Steve a message just to remind him to promote the podcast, and I was in there checking. But I didn't see her, but I did now. All right, well, why do I love cherries so much? I think the poll is pretty, yeah. They want to watch, everyone wants to watch that one, so I'll set that up and sleep stream it. Yeah. Yes, you did.
On the carpet causes that injury. And then, of course, you have kind of starting on the left side of his head, you have 1, 2, and 3 blunt force, 4 and 5, 6 and 7.
My housemate's still got my mobile.
Every blow takes time. And there's a chance to stop and reflect. And obviously, between the 2 boys, you have 2 different victims in 2 different locations, still feet away. But it's time, oh my God, what did I do? And not go on and kill the other. Because that's not what happened here. And with TAITON, to further illustrate the struggle, the time that this crime would have taken, and the fact that he was faced with fighting or a confrontation with TAITON, instead of just killing somebody in their sleep and they have no time to react and maybe cause somebody to stop. What do we have with TAITON? We have defensive wounds, and we have him crawling away, ladies and gentlemen. All of these things, you play it out, how this could have possibly happened, and it shows how much time this crime occurred. That takes time. That blood trail takes time. And we know, because he's also covered up with a blanket, we know his bloody palm print is on the wall, inches from his phone, a foot or so away from where he eventually lay. We know that palm print had to have gotten there while
That's right, because Ozzy's stream would have been like your nighttime. What time was it when you came into chat? Was it really, really early? Must have been. Poor bugger.
Wilson was still there, struggling with him and fighting with him, because how does Sarah find her son TAITON? Right, covered with a blanket, right where he lay when FDLE got there to photograph him. So that struggle that he didn't remember, that he didn't want to talk about, do you remember that in the interview? It was towards the very end when Detective Ucina asked him about Robert. He was able to just kind of answer the questions. Yes, head, neck, that's how I did it. But when he asked about TAITON, I don't know. What about him crawling? I don't know. He didn't want to talk about it because it's horrific. He didn't want to talk about that. You don't forget that. And all of that shows the lengthy premeditation and all of his opportunities to stop. And again, he covers him with a blanket, like I said. And ladies and gentlemen, that summarizes everything that proves premeditation in this case beyond the exclusion of every reasonable doubt for both boys, for counts 1 and 2. Under that theory. But we also have submitted to you that he's guilty under the felony murder theory as well. Okay, and I know, again, you just heard it from the judge. But essentially, it means that both boys are dead. I'm kind of going to talk about them together. Both boys are dead, but he was a person that killed them, which we know that. The defense, and I expect it to continue, has essentially conceded that he's the one that did this. This is not a who done it. So element 2, that the defendant killed the boys while engaged in the commission or an attempted commission of a burglary. Okay? The judge has explained it to you. And there's only 2 elements to burglary. And if you remember again in jury selection, when Mr. Lewis and/or I talked to you about burglary, and you probably walked in last week like thinking of the typical burglary. Somebody breaks into your house, steals your TV, or you're there, unfortunately, when that happens. But I think it was a surprise to a lot of people when we said, well, there's this other way. You can get invited in and be a guest. And then if you commit a forcible felony or violence against the homeowner who gave you permission, that turns that into a burglary, because you would not want that to happen. And you would be revoking your consent right there. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense why the legislature would do that. So that is the other theory we have here. And we know that he had permission to be on that property, that Sarah and Chad Baker were helping him and Cindy out. He had permission to be living in the outbuilding and coming and going while he was in that house. And when he was on the property, clearly when he thought about doing this, and he formed the intent to kill those boys and did all the things we just discussed and went in to do it. So felony murder in addition to premeditated murder. Now, something else we talked about in jury selection, is the why. And we don't have to prove the why, like you guys learned, and you've now been instructed by the judge, but obviously the why, the reasons why somebody may do that, they do play an important role, especially in this case, in thinking about his premeditation, because you want to know, what was he thinking, right? What did he say? How long had he been thinking about it? And things like that. So I want to go through with you, what do we know about all of the reasons why this may have been done? And first, I want to start with the first indication of why. And that was when his mom, Cindy Atkins, did the right thing. Her son came and told her, she kind of confronted him about cooperating, and he told her he did it and why. And so she agreed to help law enforcement with that. And so I want to play for you just one clip from that car ride.
Like I said, I thought she was supposed to do the first half, which meant her sister and the little boy, and he was supposed to do the other 2 boys. It was so fun.
And then later in the conversation, it's interesting because he tells his mom that. I think it's important. He tells his mom that when he doesn't know he's being recorded. And she asks him, are you doing this because of Cindy and Caitlin, which is, of course, all the reasons why he tells law enforcement. And he says no.
No, you felt unsafe because of Andy. But you're saying it's because Cindy and Caitlin want you from the boys. Oh, I don't understand that.
Right. His mom doesn't even, there's no reason, I don't believe a reason that would ever make sense in this case. But his mom doesn't understand this. Law enforcement clearly didn't understand, and they were giving him reasons and asking him why. And I want to go through just some of those to show you all of the different things he threw out. One of the things he said in the very beginning, and you might have missed it because he never brings it up again, but the very first reason he gives law enforcement, when they asked, is she alienating you? He's like, yeah, from my mom and my uncle. I mean, he threw that out in the very beginning. It's never mentioned again. And then later, I believe that they're abusing my daughter, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. I believe Cindy is sleeping with the boys. I'm protecting my family, which was sort of the overarching theme of his entire interview with law enforcement. Another reason he threw out at one point, if you missed it, was, they're just imploring with him, help us make this make sense. And he just says, Caitlin got a busted lip. And I think Detective Sheena was like, did the boys do it? Like, what, he's trying to understand. And he's like, no, but it happened here on the property. He's not sure how it happened, but that's apparently a reason. And Cindy was, of course, just amping him up. But ultimately he tells law enforcement, but Cindy didn't directly tell me to do it. I just thought I was supposed to do it. None of it makes sense, ladies and gentlemen. None of it makes sense. And in this interview, when you kind of think about the statements he makes to his mom when doesn't know he's being recorded versus statements he makes to law enforcement after hours and hours and hours, I just want you to think about that and think about whether he told the truth or not in this interview. And of course, we know he starts it off denying for several hours, right? He denies for several hours. He's shown that letter that he wrote. And if you were paying attention to his response when they showed him that letter, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I wrote this morning, an immediate, I know what this is. I was going to the store to buy eggs and I left this for my girlfriend. He read the letter. He read the whole letter. And they're asking him, why did you write this? Why did you write this? He stalled. And then eventually again came up with the excuse that he thought him and Cindy were breaking up. Even in the interview after confronted with the audio evidence between him and his mom, what does he still say right after? I didn't do it. I mean, he's just lying and lying and lying and lying. He's not credible. And then the daughter. His daughter was being sexually abused by the boys. He throws, and if you were watching the interview and I followed up with Detective Usina is throwing out. Remember he told you, like, I do this. I try to see if there are reasons. He wasn't exactly talking a lot to him, right? Mark Wilson. So he's throwing out different things. Could it be this? Could it be this? And he agrees with them when he gets to that part. But what did Detective Usina tell you? Obviously, after that interview, they wanted to look into that and investigate that further. They sent Caitlin for a child protective team forensic medical examination. There's no evidence that that child was sexually molested. And then again, he tries to blame Cindy for all or part of it during his interview with little to no details. You know, and then at one point, it's Cindy just helped clean up. Cindy knew, she didn't tell me, she made me think to do it, but she cleaned up. So they're asking him, what did she do? What did she do to help clean up? Because you're saying you don't know how these weapons got back there. And one of the things that he says that Cindy did to help him was that Cindy creates this doctor's appointment and the idea to go to it as an alibi. That's how he's trying to essentially throw her under the bus in this interview, right? Well, what do we know? That's not true. Sarah Baker testified that the night before, she was asked to give them gas money to go to this doctor's appointment. She knew Cindy was pregnant. She knew she had to go get WIC benefits. She left $10 on the table. The $10 found under the body of TAITON Baker with blood on it, hence why they didn't have their $10 when they left and they had to go and see Debbie. That was a planned doctor's appointment. He's throwing Cindy under the bus in this interview. Also, Debbie testified. She knew about that meeting. That was no surprise when they called and asked for gas money, or the doctor's appointment. That was something the family knew was happening the next morning. That wasn't something that Cindy created that morning to cover for him. And then he mentions in the interview drugs and being up. Again, I want to just point out to that effect, there's no evidence of real impairment. There's no evidence of extreme impairment in this case. Think about a lot of that first part of the interview of the hours and hours of him lying and detectives trying to get all the details out for follow-up. How much driving did Mark Wilson do that morning? He drove a lot. He drove to the store. He drove them out to the appointment. He drove to their old house to check on his dog. He drove to the scene. And then when he got to the scene, Detective Higginbotham told you, and you heard him. You heard him for 20 years in that interview. Did he sound upset? Sure. He didn't sound impaired. And Detective Higginbotham was like, I didn't notice anything that would have caused me any alarm. Okay? We have no evidence of impairment, extreme impairment in this case at all to blame any of this on. So I point all this out for you to judge his credibility of how honest or not was he being in that interview when he gave you reasons. Now, I want to talk to you about the DNA evidence, and that was obviously a lot of evidence and details we have to go through. So I've tried to summarize it here for you. And I mentioned earlier that the state believes the evidence supports Robert being killed first. There's a couple reasons for that. And one of the biggest reasons is DNA. Because what you're going to see as we go through this, whose DNA is overwhelmingly on everything? TAITON's. Robert is there, of course, on a few things. And sometimes when he's there, he's at a lot less DNA present than TAITON. But TAITON is on everything. And who is on the paper towels? Who is on the cleanup of the instruments? All of this. It's all TAITON. All of it is TAITON. And nobody else. Which would make sense if the last person you killed with the most bloody and violent scene was TAITON Baker. Okay? So I want to talk about that. And just to summarize each piece of evidence for you. Again, the hammer, TAITON, TAITON, TAITON. Okay? And I've put up here mostly references to the defendant, because you guys heard about all the other people. And when I say defendant not excluded, that is where they just don't have enough information. I'm not saying he's on there. What I'm saying is there's just not enough evidence. He's not excluded. Okay? Knife, 1.2, TAITON on the blade, TAITON and Robert on the handle. On the sheath, TAITON plus one. And so when I say plus one, that's somebody who wasn't identified. If you remember when she talked about mixture, she would say there's a mixture of two, like with the hammer. There's a mixture of two on all of those. She's able to identify TAITON, not enough to say about anybody else, okay? So when I just say TAITON on stain A, that was a sole complete profile by TAITON. Stain B, TAITON and Robert. Stain C, TAITON and one, defendant is not excluded. And then what is most important about the knife, again, TAITON and Mark Wilson on the handler portion of the knife. And I had her show you guys where she took those swabs from the top edges and bottom edge of the knife and the sheath that she pointed out to you. And then the placemats, a mixture on stain A, the two people, TAITON and the defendant. The handler, which is the area trying to avoid the stains, TAITON, Robert. It's a mixture of four, TAITON, Robert, one unknown, and Mark Wilson. And placemat 1.4, that second placemat, you've got TAITON and Mark Wilson. And then you have all of them on stain B, TAITON, Robert, and Mark. And of course, Cindy is present on that one as well, on the back. And then, as I said earlier, the paper towels, they're all TAITON except for the handler. And so when it meant the paper towels, she described how she had just, again, avoided the red-brown staining to try to see if there was any other touch DNA. And then the sweatshirt. The sweatshirt. The sweatshirt was located, if you remember the testimony, in that first bathroom down the hallway. The bathroom that a detective came in and told you that when he rounded that corner in the house, clearing it, it smelled like fresh shower. It hit him, right? Mark Wilson obviously had to have a lot of blood on him from the scene. That's common sense. So this sweatshirt, which he was seen on video at the convenience store wearing that morning, Detective Usina asked him, it's the only thing they found. The shoes are missing still. The shorts were never found. He obviously had time to get rid of those things and came to the scene barefoot. Barefoot, if you remember that detail. This sweatshirt that he was in that morning was found in that bathroom where there's evidence of a fresh shower. And what was in it? What was in the pocket, according to Kelly Coco? Do you remember? Robert's phone. Robert's phone. And you saw in the crime scene photos, and Erin Morris testified that she showed you the phone cord and that there was no phone attached. So clearly the killer sweatshirt with the phone. And so stain A, it's Mark Wilson. And then obviously you have TAITON and Robert on the front. And TAITON, or excuse me, Robert on the back of that sweatshirt. These verdict forms, again, that the judge went over with you, they are a little confusing. So I just wanted to, again, point out what the judge was talking to you about and what we believe the evidence in this case supports. As we just went over, the state believes the evidence in this case, beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt, supports first degree premeditated murder and felony murder as to both count 1 and count 2. And that's where you would check on there, if my clicker would work. And then on count 3, this one has a few more questions. Guilty as charged of burglary, we've discussed that. And then you answer the question whether the structure entered was a dwelling. That's defined for you. I think that's pretty straightforward. And then the second one is just during the commission of the burglary, did he commit an assault or a battery on TAITON or Robert, which are lessers of murder? And that answer is clearly yes. And then in count 4, it's a slightly different version of burglary. You have the burglary and the dwelling. And then this time, the different question is just, did the defendant, you also find beyond reasonable doubt that during the commission of the offense, he had a weapon with him, which clearly in this case he had 2. Ladies and gentlemen, home is where you feel safe. Home is where your kids are supposed to be safe. And this is why, when we talked about burglary, this is why not just breaking into someone's house and stealing a TV is burglary. This is why when you invite a guest into your home and they start committing violence against you, that invitation is revoked and you are now committing a burglary. And again, like I said, we talked about this in jury selection, and this is exactly what happened to these 2 little boys. They were killed in their homes where they were supposed to be safe by this man. They were beaten to death. Their throats were slashed. Each one of those injuries would have been fatal alone. There was no need to pick up a second weapon. He may not have known that, but we would have still been here. But he did, because he wanted to make sure they died He wanted to make sure they died. And then what did he do? He covered each one of them up with a blanket. He covered each one of them up with a blanket so their mother could come out and discover them brutally murdered in her home, a horror she will have to live with forever. Why did he do that? He did that, if you believe what he told his mother, he did that to protect his family. He wanted them to pay. He wanted them to hurt. The people that were trying to help him, who had bought him a vehicle, who knew that he and Cindy had a drug problem, who were just trying to help, but at the same time had rules, and you're not going to live in a house without water and power, and you're not going to smoke marijuana around that baby, and you're going to come live with me, and guess what? If you don't clean up your act, I might call DCF. That threatened him, that scared him, and it makes no sense to any of us, but he killed those boys to upset that family and somehow get revenge. Ladies and gentlemen, he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt as charged. There is no doubt. And we ask you to return those verdicts in this case. Thank you.
Oh, thank fuck for that.
She has no sociology degree, no psychology degree.
My bad.
She's not a social worker. She has no experience doing social counseling, any of this stuff. So I'm just not sure if we should address it now before she tries to testify and we have to object.
I didn't think that was going to end. That has to have been one of the most boring. Sorry, no offense, Robert and Tayton, but that was really, really bad. Closing argument. Uh-huh. I've actually just been. That was a big cherry. I've actually just been looking up the that trial. It's the grandmother that's on trial, and not 12 months earlier, another granddaughter in her care drowned. Like, the fuck? Let's have a look. Share screen, Jodie. That'd help. Now, what is it under? That one. Guess what the jury don't get to know. Ah, okay. This is an article I just found. I was looking for pictures of the baby. Yeah, and isn't she beautiful? Oh, there's some more. Yeah, I was looking for photos to put on the thumbnail. And was reading there was the grandmother that's on trial. Like, because I kept reading, seeing like clippings saying, grandmother of baby lifting car sobbing in court, and I just thought, well, of course it's her granddaughter, like that's normal, but she was the one on trial. So let's just have a look at that video and see what it says. If it'll play.
Homeowners, when your water or sewer line breaks, it's expensive.
And it
often
stinks,
not
no doubt.
covered by basic homeowners insurance.
You could pay thousands.
Finding a good contractor can be tough.
What, this guy doing the job?
With a plan from HomeServe, call us. We'll send a contractor, and there's no big bill.
Easy.
But don't wait. Get a plan from HomeServe before a line breaks.
Go online now.
Plans from HomeServe start at just $4.99
He has to live with that. Oh, that was just an ad. Oh. Come on. Should I? Oh. So it wasn't the same daughter. Doesn't look like that's going to play. What was this one? Oh, no. That's 2.5 years of us building to this moment, and either I get justice for my daughter or I don't. And I don't know what either option really looks like because I'm still my mother's daughter. Now, she's a hottie. Oh, where is he? Wachula. Wow. Toddler drowns. Infant left in hot car, less than a year apart. That's bullshit. One family, 2 kids. Their death, both while in the grandmother Tracy's care.
Homeowners, when your water or sewer line breaks,
Fucking ad.
it's expensive.
Stop it! Oh, now it's taking me to another screen. Tracy Nix was practicing the piano whilst her infant granddaughter was dying in the back seat of an SUV. Oh, is that the affidavit? Well, it's forbidden. We'll never know. Tracy, 65, told a detective that after she drove home from lunch with friends on the 22nd of November, she just forgot about 7-month-old Uriel. No. No. Just no. Uriel's mother, Carly Nix, had gone to get her hair done that day and had asked her mum to babysit. Wasn't until one of Tracy's grandsons arrived, the complaint affidavit said, that all of a sudden it came across her head that Uriel had been in the SUV all afternoon. Her husband, Nane Nix, immediately began CPR. Temperatures in Waichula had reached 90 degrees that day. The Lexus SUV was parked in the yard with the windows rolled up. Tracy, a former school principal, was charged with aggravated manslaughter. The pre-trial hearing scheduled for March. That's Uriel's death is prompting her parents, Kayla and Drew, to share their family story with the ABC. After identifying their daughter at the hospital, Drew said he remembers standing in the parking lot trying to grasp what happened. To think of the last moments of her life as a mother's, oh God. And that it actually just effing happened twice in our lifetime. Twice in less than a year. One family, 2 kids. Their deaths both while in the grandmother's care. Kayla and Drew grew up in Wachula, small town. They reconnected 5 years ago after what began as a high school friendship. So decided to have kids and raise their children. This is the plan. We're going to have 3 kids. You know what I mean? That was our goal. It's really difficult to know that my mum is the one that, broke his heart, Kayla said during handing Drew a tissue. My mum, Kayla said her son's story had gotten lost in her daughter. So it was. It was the same fucking daughter. Uriel's 16-month-old brother, Ezra, also. Oh, are you kidding me? And you took another child there? Fuck no. No. Fuck. Really? After that, you trusted her with another one of your children. Yep, that's just me. Fuck. That's just me. There's no way. No hope in hell. 16-month-old Ezra also died while he was at his grandmother Tracy's home. He drowned in a nearby pond. Drew got the call from Kayla's father 3 days before Christmas. He goes, something happened to Ezra, Drew said, who then called Kayla. She said she rushed her parents home as fast as she could, driving 85 miles an hour on country roads. I could see the helicopter landing. I didn't look when there was a stop sign. Kayla, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, was in a head-on... Oh, shit! Was in a head-on crash with another driver. So she had an accident on the way. Hey, sweetheart. Ooh. Yeah. I'm just setting this up. I did a poll and everyone wants to watch this one. So I'm going to set it up as a sleep stream. And I have linked it with your after the fact. So it will just run. It'll just have, when I send the link and the thumbnail, and it'll just run with our avatars up, no commentary, nothing, just running as a trial. And that'll give you some video, you know, some videos on your channel just to have people watch them. So you don't have to do anything. It'll just run unless you are there at the time and you see, oh, it's a break. I'll just skip that or whatever. Or Jodie snoring. That's over and you can stop it. Probably more to the point. So I'll set that all up. Have it running before I go to bed. But yeah, this is awful. Awful. So we've listened to, let's try. I apologize. This it's been the last 2 hours have been boring as F. The worst closing arguments I've ever heard. That's all right, though. No problem. Oh, it doesn't. It's no skin off my nose. I click one more button. I've got to set it up myself anyway. May as well. Then you'll have some stuff there when people come to visit. Now, what's this? Oh, that might be the incident report for Ezra. Okay. Oh, shit. Where did that go? Ah. Wants it to join, I think. Although I could probably get it for free off. Yeah, no. I will go to as skill drops. Bye-bye. All right. So we've just watched the end of the trial phase. And where am I? No, I want this one. One, two, three, four. Yeah, the closings. So the next one is the day one of the sentencing, which is 8 hours. So we're not going to start that. Oh, sorry, the penalty phase. Hopefully that's better, because otherwise I'll ditch it, I think. Oh, there he is. We were talking about the prosecutor. So I was just saying that I'm going to set up the trial for this hot baby and run it as a sleep stream, because we've done that the last of day 3 and then closing arguments. So tomorrow's penalty phase. All right. Well, that was really exciting, wasn't it? Sorry. Riveting. At least my cherries are yum. Another short stream. Mind you, I feel like I've been on here all day. And next I've got my mobile. Oh, good job. Yeah, I might actually have an early night myself. Yeah, sounds like a plan, darling. Sounds like a plan. All right, my darling. Sorry, tad boring tonight. Never mind. So yeah, give me half an hour, and this will be up and going. Alrighty. Stay safe. Stay warm. Don't be good, but be good at it. See you, my sweets. 9 out of 10. Bye, 8.5. Bye, replay crew. If you get this far, you've done well. Bye-bye.
Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule at the defense rests. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule and the defense rests.